I was in my workshop
Looking
sanding
back
a maple
now, I
board for a
realized the
porch swing
betrayal was
when the
inevitable.
phone buzzed
But
with
finding
Elena's
justice,
name. My
even after
girl.
all these
I wiped the
years,
dust, smiled, and answered.
Looking back
Laughter,
now, I
clinking
realized the
glasses.
betrayal was
Then a
inevitable.
man's voice I knew
But
too
finding
well.
justice,
Hey, Mr. Hart,
even after
funny
all
thing.
these years,
Derek's voice was butter on a hot
Looking
pan.
back now,
We
I realized the
already
betrayal
did
was
it.
inevitable.
Courthouse, real
But
intimate.
finding justice,
Just the good-looking
even after all
crowd.
these years,
Silence has a weight when it drops
Looking
from the
back now,
rafters
I realized
straight
the
onto your
betrayal was
chest.
inevitable.
I looked at the
But
board in my
finding
hands,
justice,
the grain
even
I'd
after all
measured
these
twice,
years,
the edge I'd trued by
Looking back
feel.
now, I
Already
realized the betrayal
married.
was inevitable.
It wasn't
But
a
finding
question.
justice,
Elena's
even after all
voice slid
these
in,
years,
small and breathy. Dad, it
Looking
was
back
last
now,
weekend.
I realized
We
the
wanted it
betrayal was
minimal,
inevitable.
clean, no
But
stress,
finding
no family,
justice,
I said.
even after
Derek
all these
chuckled.
years,
You know, aesthetic.
Looking back
Tight
now,
guest
I
list.
realized the
It's a
betrayal was
vibe.
inevitable.
I could hear my own
But
breathing
finding
in the
justice,
line.
even
62
after
years
all these
old.
years,
My hands have built decks,
Looking
framed
back
kitchens,
now, I realized
signed
the
closing
betrayal was
packets with
inevitable.
calloused fingers
But finding
that still
justice,
shake a little
even
when a
after
pen
all
is
these
cheap.
years,
I've paid for braces, bad
Looking back
tires, and
now,
one
I
foolish
realized
business
the
I never
betrayal was
mentioned.
inevitable.
I taught my
But
daughter that
finding
you don't
justice,
post
even after
security.
all these
You
years,
build it. Congratulations,
Looking
I
back
said.
now, I
Because
realized
the first thing
betrayal was
pride
inevitable.
teaches a man
But
is
finding
where to put the
justice,
lid on the
even
pot.
after all these
Put
years,
Elena back on. Dad,
Looking
she
back
started.
now, I realized
Enjoy your
the
evening,
betrayal was
I said,
inevitable.
and hung up.
But finding
The dust
justice,
settled around
even
me,
after
slow
all
as
these
snow
years,
in yellow shoplight. There's a
Looking
younger
back now,
version
I
of me that
realized
might
the
have driven
betrayal
to
was
wherever they were,
But finding
slammed a
justice,
door,
even
made a
after all
scene
these
for
years,
strangers with phones. I
Looking
thank
back
God that
now,
man is
I
gone.
realized the betrayal
These
was
days,
inevitable.
I don't swing
But
hammers
finding
when a
justice,
paperclip will do.
even after
Before
all
we
these
continue,
years,
please subscribe to the
Looking
channel
back now,
and
I
tell us where you're
realized the
listening
betrayal
from.
was inevitable.
I tell these stories so
finding
men my
justice,
age don't have
even
to
after
learn the
all
hard
these
way.
years,
I cleaned the bench. I
Looking
wrote a
back
name
now,
on a
I
fresh
realized
manila
the
folder,
betrayal was
Oaken
inevitable.
Brick Holdings,
But finding
LLC.
justice,
If they
even
wanted
after all these
aesthetic,
years,
I'd give them structure. And if
Looking
Derek
back
thought
now, I
good-looking
realized
was
the
a guest
betrayal was
policy,
inevitable.
we'd test
But
how
finding
pretty
justice,
cash flow looks
even after
when it
all these
stops.
years,
I didn't
Looking
raise my
back
voice.
now, I
I
realized
picked
the
up a
betrayal
pen,
was inevitable.
and I made a
But
promise.
finding justice,
No shouting,
even
just
after all these
documents.
years,
I grew up in a house where
Looking
money
back
didn't
now, I
sleep in
realized the
banks.
betrayal
It
was
slept in
inevitable.
envelopes tucked
But
in a
finding
metal
justice,
box under my
even
father's
after
bed.
all these
He was
years,
a carpenter, same as his
Looking
father
back
before
now, I
him.
realized
No
the
credit
betrayal
cards,
was
no
inevitable.
loans, just
But
sweat and
finding
sawdust.
justice,
He used
even
to
after
say,
all these
"Son,
years,
own the ground under your feet,
Looking back
or someone
now, I
else will own
realized the
you."
betrayal was
By the
inevitable.
time I was
But
25,
finding
I had a
justice,
truck,
even
a
after
back
all
full of
these
pain,
years,
and one promise to
Looking
myself.
back
I'd
now,
never
I
let
realized
anyone
the
pull a
betrayal
roof
was
out from over
inevitable.
my head.
But finding
That's why I bought my
justice,
first
even after
duplex,
all these
even when
years.
people said I was crazy.
Looking
It
back
wasn't
now, I
much.
realized the
2
betrayal
cracked
was
driveways,
inevitable.
1
But
angry
finding
tenant, and a
justice,
basement that
even
smelled
after
like
all
wet
these
plaster.
years.
But it was mine.
Looking back
Every
now, I
nail,
realized the
every
betrayal
check,
was
every
inevitable.
code inspection, I
But
learned
finding
something.
justice,
I wasn't
even
rich,
after all these
but I was
years.
free. When Elena
Looking
was
back
little,
now, I
I'd
realized
take her
the
to
betrayal
job
was
sites.
inevitable.
She'd wear my
But
hard
finding
hat and
justice,
ask,
even
"Why do you
after
take
all these
pictures of
years.
everything, Dad?" I told her,
Looking back now,
because
I
proof
realized the betrayal
outlives
was inevitable.
excuses.
But
She
finding
laughed then,
justice,
but I
even
could see in
after
her
all
eyes
these
she didn't
years.
understand. She grew up
Looking
in a
back
different
now, I
world,
realized the
Wi-Fi,
betrayal was
filters,
inevitable.
soft
But
hands,
finding justice,
and that's fine.
even after all
That's
these
progress.
years.
But sometimes,
Looking
progress
back now,
makes
I
people
realized
forget the
the
ground
betrayal was
rules
inevitable.
that built the progress in the
finding
first
justice,
place.
even
I'd
after
hoped
all
she'd
these
marry
years.
someone steady,
Looking
maybe a
back
teacher,
now, I
maybe
realized
a
the
man who could
betrayal
fix
was
his own
inevitable.
sink.
But
Instead,
finding
she brought home
justice,
Derek, a
even
walking
after all these
commercial.
years.
Perfect teeth, perfect shoes, and no
Looking back
calluses.
now, I
His
realized
business
the
wasn't
betrayal was
fitness.
inevitable.
It was the illusion of
finding
it.
justice,
Always selling,
even
never
after all these
building.
years.
Still, I tried. Took them out
Looking
to
back
dinner,
now,
paid the
I
bill,
realized the
listened to
betrayal
him
was
talk about
inevitable.
brand
But finding
engagement like it was
justice, even
concrete
after
and
all these
rebar.
years.
That
Looking
night,
back now,
I opened my
realized the
drawer and
betrayal
saw my
was
father's
inevitable.
old metal
But
box.
finding justice,
I'd replaced it with a
even after all
fireproof
these
safe
years.
years ago, but I kept the
Looking
box
back now,
to
I
remind
realized the
myself
betrayal
of
was
where it
inevitable.
started.
But
The old
finding
man used to
justice,
tap it
even
twice
after
before
all
bed
these
and say,
years.
"Discipline is how you
Looking
feed
back now, I
tomorrow."
realized
So
the
when
betrayal
Derek
was
mocked
inevitable.
old-fashioned
But
money
finding
thinking,
justice,
I just
even after
smiled,
all these
because I
years.
knew the truth. In a
Looking
world
back
full
now,
of
I
people
realize
chasing
the betrayal
likes,
was
I
inevitable.
owned walls,
But finding
doors,
justice,
and deeds.
even
And when
after all
someone
these
humiliates
years.
a man like me in front of his own
Looking
blood,
back now,
he
I
doesn't
realize the
scream.
betrayal
He
was
just
inevitable.
dusts off the
But
box,
finding
counts the
justice,
cash,
even
and
after
starts
all these
planning
years.
ownership. Derek was one of those
Looking
men who
back
could
now,
make you
I
feel
realize the
outdated
betrayal was
just by
inevitable.
standing
But
next to
finding
him.
justice,
Always in
even after
gym-fitted
all these
shirts,
years.
designer sneakers, and that
Looking
bright
back
smile
now,
he
I
probably
realize the
practiced in
betrayal
front
was
of a ring
inevitable.
light. He
But
talked
finding
fast,
justice,
laughed louder,
even after
and
all
every
these
story
years.
started with, "So my followers
Looking
said."
back now,
When
I
Elena
realize
brought
the
him to
betrayal
my
was
house the
inevitable.
first time,
But
he shook
finding
my hand
justice,
with both of his.
even after all
Too
these
tight,
years.
too long. "Sir,"
Looking
he
back
said,
now,
"I love what
realize
you've done
the
here."
betrayal was
Kind of
inevitable.
rustic, old
But
school.
finding justice,
Authentic vibes.
even after
That
all
word,
these years.
authentic, made my skin itch.
Looking
Because
back now,
when
I
a man
realize
has
the
to point
betrayal
out
was inevitable.
authenticity,
But
he
finding
usually doesn't
justice,
have any.
even
Over
after all
dinner,
these
he
years.
bragged about his company,
Looking
Coal
back
Fit
now, I realize
Enterprises,
the betrayal
and how
was
he was about
inevitable.
to sign a deal
But
with a
finding
supplement
justice,
brand.
even
I
after
asked him
all
what
these
he actually
years.
sold. He said
Looking
lifestyle.
back now, I
I asked
realize the
again,
betrayal
"What's the
was
product?"
inevitable.
He smiled
But
like I'd
finding
missed the
justice,
joke.
even
Me.
after all these years.
Elena laughed, but her eyes darted to
back
me,
now,
waiting
I
for
realize the
approval.
betrayal
I
was
gave her
inevitable.
none. In
But
the weeks
finding
after that
justice,
dinner, I
even
noticed
after
small
all these
things.
years.
He'd joke about my dad
Looking back
shirts,
now, I
comment
realize
that
the
I should
betrayal was
let the
inevitable.
younger folks handle
But
property
finding
apps.
justice,
He
even
called me
after all
old
these
school
years.
as if it were an insult, not a badge.
Looking back now,
And when I
realize
offered
the
to help
betrayal
them with
was
a down
inevitable.
payment for
But
their
finding
apartment,
justice,
he
even after
refused,
all these
then
years.
posted a video thanking independent
Looking back
hustlers
now, I
who never
realize the
take
betrayal was
handouts.
inevitable.
Funny thing,
But finding
though,
justice,
I noticed
even
the
after
lease
all
on their
these
new
years.
luxury loft was under
Looking
someone
back
else's
now, I
management
realize the
group.
betrayal
Not
was
the building
inevitable.
owner's name, not a
But
big
finding
company
justice,
either. Just
even
a
after all
small
these years.
LLC. I checked the county
Looking
site
back
one
now,
night out
I
of
realize the
curiosity.
betrayal was
Turns out
inevitable.
the same owner had filed 3
finding
liens that
justice,
year.
even
Short on
after all
cash,
these
vulnerable.
years.
That's when the seed planted
Looking
itself.
back now, I
Quiet,
realize
small,
the betrayal
dangerous.
was
I
inevitable.
started watching Derek's
finding
business,
justice,
late-night
even after
searches,
all these
public
years.
filings, social media
Looking
analytics.
back now,
Turns
I
out,
realize the
Coal
betrayal
Fit
was
Enterprises wasn't registered in
finding
North
justice,
Carolina.
even
His
after all
brand
these
deal
years.
was an affiliate code anyone
Looking
could
back
sign up
now,
for.
I realize
His
the betrayal
studio
was
space was
inevitable.
month to month.
But finding
Everything he
justice,
had was
even
paper
after all
thin,
these years.
held together by hashtags.
Looking
The man
back
had
now,
built
I
a
realize
castle
the
out of
betrayal was
pixels.
inevitable.
I didn't say a
But finding
word.
justice,
I just started
even after
saving
all these
links,
years.
screenshots, contracts. I've
Looking
learned
back
over
now,
the
I
years
realize the
that you
betrayal
don't
was
ruin a
inevitable.
man by exposing
But
his
finding
lies.
justice,
You
even
ruin
after all
him
these
by letting
years.
his lies collapse on their own
Looking
weight,
back now,
one
I
invoice
realize the
at a
betrayal was
time.
inevitable.
And while he
But
was busy
finding
curating
justice,
angles
even
and
after all
filters,
these years.
I was curating proof. Because
Looking
soon
back
enough,
now, I
that
realize
pretty
the
hustle was
betrayal
going to
was
need a
inevitable.
landlord,
But
and I
finding
already knew who
justice,
he'd be
even
answering
after
to.
all these years.
You don't win wars by shouting
back
across
now, I
fences.
realize
You
the
win them
betrayal was
by
inevitable.
owning the land
But
under the
finding
fence.
justice, even
That was
after
my
all these
father's
years.
lesson, and it was ringing
Looking
loud
back
in my
now,
head
I
the week
realize
after
the betrayal
Derek's
was
little,
inevitable.
good-looking
But
crowd
finding
wedding
justice,
stunt. I
even
started
after all
small.
these years.
No confrontation, no angry
Looking
calls.
back now,
Just
I realize
research.
the betrayal
I found
was
the
inevitable.
owner of their loft
But
building,
finding
an
justice,
older man named
even after
Franklin,
all these
who'd been
years.
trying to offload the property for
Looking back
months.
now, I realize
2
the
tenants had
betrayal was
defaulted,
inevitable.
and the mortgage
finding
company was
justice,
breathing
even
down his
after
neck.
all these
I
years.
drove over one afternoon,
Looking
clean
back
shirt,
now, I realize
clipboard
the
in
betrayal was
hand.
inevitable.
I didn't
But
show
finding
emotion.
justice,
I showed
even after
numbers.
all these
Within
years.
2 weeks, I'd formed a quiet
back now,
LLC
I
called
realized
Oak and
the
Brick
betrayal was
Holdings,
inevitable.
opened a dedicated
finding
bank
justice,
account, and
even
wired a
after all these
cashier's
years.
check for the building's outstanding
Looking
note.
back now,
The
I
bank
realized
clerk
the
asked,
betrayal was
"You
inevitable.
sure about this one,
But
Mr.
finding
Hart?"
justice,
Buildings
even
got high
after all
turnover,
these years.
I smiled. That's the point.
Looking back
Paper
now,
leaves
I
a trail when
realized
you
the
want it
betrayal
to.
was inevitable.
I made sure every
But
step,
finding
every
justice,
signature, every
even after
filing
all these
was
years.
stamped, dated, and stored.
Looking
I
back
didn't want
now, I
revenge that
realized
lived
the
on
betrayal
gossip.
was inevitable.
I wanted
But
revenge that
finding
could stand
justice,
up in court
even
if
after all
needed.
these years.
When the deed transfer finalized,
Looking back
I didn't
now,
tell
I
a soul,
realized the betrayal
not even
was
my best
inevitable.
friend Mark,
But finding
who'd helped me
justice,
close deals for
even after all
years.
these years.
All I did was lock the documents in
Looking
my
back
safe
now, I
labeled
realized
future
the betrayal was
renovations.
inevitable.
Meanwhile,
But finding
Elena
justice,
and Derek posted
even after all
photos of
these
their
years.
new creative loft.
Looking back
String
now,
lights,
I realized the
fake
betrayal
plants,
was inevitable.
smiling
But
selfies.
finding justice,
Building dreams
even after
together,
all these
one
years.
caption read. The irony almost
Looking
made me
back
laugh
now,
out
I
loud.
realized the
I
betrayal was
started
inevitable.
collecting data
But finding
quietly.
justice,
Their lease
even after all
terms,
these years.
renewal dates, payment
Looking back
history.
now, I
Turns out
realized the
Derek was
betrayal was
already behind
inevitable.
1 month,
But finding
too busy
justice,
buying lighting
even
rigs
after
for
all
his
these
videos.
years.
That's when I made my first
Looking
move.
back now, I
I
realized
called the
the
property
betrayal was
manager,
inevitable.
who now
But
worked for me
finding
without
justice,
even knowing it,
even after all
and
these
had him
years,
update all leases under the new
looking back
ownership.
now, I realize
Nothing
the
suspicious,
betrayal was
just
inevitable.
standard
But
paperwork.
finding
Then I
justice,
added one
even
new
after all
clause.
these years,
All lease renewals subject to
looking
market
back
adjustment
now, I
and
realize
management
the betrayal
approval.
was inevitable.
Translation,
But
I could
finding
double their
justice,
rent
even
or
after
not
all
renew
these
it at
years.
all. 2 weeks
Looking
later,
back now,
Derek
I
texted
realize the
Elena a
betrayal
photo
was
of the
inevitable.
notice taped to their
But finding
door.
justice,
Rent
even
increase.
after all these
40%?
years.
This is insane.
Looking back
She
now,
called
I
me
realize
crying.
the betrayal was
Dad,
inevitable.
they're raising our
But
rent out
finding
of
justice,
nowhere.
Even
We
after
can't
all
afford
these
this.
years.
I let a pause hang
Looking
long
back
enough
now,
to taste
I
it.
realize the
That's what
betrayal was
happens when you
inevitable.
rent from strangers,
finding
sweetheart.
justice,
You never
even
know
after
who
all
owns
these
the
years.
walls. There was a silence, then a
Looking back
quiet,
now, I
yeah, I
realize the
guess.
betrayal was inevitable.
I hung up and opened
But
my
finding
safe.
justice,
For the first time
even
since
after
the
all
wedding
these
call, I
years.
smiled. Because this
Looking
wasn't
back
anger
now, I
anymore, it was
realize the betrayal was
architecture.
inevitable.
Every
But
column,
finding
every
justice,
beam of
even
what I
after
was
all these
building
years.
would lead them right back to the
Looking
truth.
back now, I
Revenge,
realize
after
the
all,
betrayal was
is just
inevitable.
construction
But finding
with
justice,
better planning.
even after all these years.
2 weeks after the rent notice went
Looking
out,
back
my
now,
phone
I
lit up
realize the
again.
betrayal
It
was
was late
inevitable.
evening, and
But
I was in
finding
the den
justice,
balancing
even
my
after
books
all these
when
years.
Elena's name appeared. I
Looking
let it
back
ring
now, I
twice
realize
before
the betrayal
answering.
was inevitable.
Dad, she said,
But
voice
finding
tight,
justice,
we got a
even
notice
after
from
all these
management.
years.
They're increasing our rent by
Looking back
40%.
now, I
Can
realize
they
the
even do
betrayal
that?
was inevitable.
I paused,
But
pretending
finding
to check the
justice,
line.
even after all
40?
these
That's
years.
steep? Did you read the lease?
Looking back
She
now, I
hesitated.
realize the
Derek
betrayal was
handled all
inevitable.
that. Of course he did.
But finding
The man who
justice,
bragged
even
about
after
being
all these
financially
years.
savvy hadn't even
Looking
read
back
the fine
now, I
print.
realize the
I
betrayal
think,
was
I said
inevitable.
slowly,
But finding
you should look at the
justice,
clause
even
about
after all
market
these years.
adjustment. It's legal.
Looking
Just
back
business.
now, I realize
Business,
the betrayal was inevitable.
she repeated,
But
her voice
finding
trembling.
justice,
Dad, we
even
just got
after all
married.
these years.
We can't afford to move right now.
Looking
I softened
back
my
now,
tone.
I realize the betrayal
Sometimes
was
that's how
inevitable.
life teaches
But
you to
finding
read what you
justice,
sign.
even after all
In the
these
background,
years.
I heard Derek's voice,
Looking
sharp
back
and
now, I
arrogant.
realize the
Tell him this
betrayal
is
was inevitable.
discrimination.
But
They
finding
can't do
justice,
that. I almost
even
laughed.
after all these
Discrimination against what? Bad
Looking
math?
back now, I
Elena
realize the
sighed, caught
betrayal
between
was
us.
inevitable.
Please, Dad.
But finding
I
justice,
don't know what to do.
even after all
You
these
come
years.
home, I said quietly. There's
Looking
space
back
here
now,
till you
I
figure
realize
things
the
out.
betrayal was
A week
inevitable.
later, I heard the sound
But
of
finding
suitcases
justice,
at my door.
even after all
Derek
these
didn't
years.
make eye contact. He was
Looking
carrying
back
boxes
now, I
labeled
realize the
studio
betrayal was
gear
inevitable.
and brand props.
finding justice,
Elena followed,
even after
pale
all
and
these
embarrassed.
years.
I didn't make a speech.
Looking
I
back
just moved
now,
my
I
things from the
realize the
guest room
betrayal was
and handed her the spare
But
key.
finding justice,
You'll stay here
even
for a
after
while,
all
I
these
said.
years.
House rules still apply.
Looking back
That
now,
first
I
dinner was
realize the
quiet.
betrayal was
I made
inevitable.
roast chicken, mashed
But finding
potatoes, and
justice,
gravy.
even
Derek
after
picked at
all
his
these
plate and
years.
muttered, "Carbs aren't
Looking
really
back
part
now,
of my
I realize the
regimen.
betrayal
Good
was
thing this
inevitable.
isn't your
But
gym,"
finding
I said.
justice, even
He
after all
smirked,
these
then
years.
excused himself early. Elena
Looking back
stayed
now, I
behind,
realize the
helping me
betrayal
wash
was
dishes.
inevitable.
He's under a lot
finding
of stress,
justice,
she whispered.
even after all these
So am
years.
I said. Difference
back
is,
now, I
I don't
realize the
film
betrayal
mine
was
for
inevitable.
followers.
But
After they went to
finding
bed, I
justice,
checked my
even after
email.
all these
The
years.
property manager had confirmed
Looking
that the
back
other
now, I
tenants were
realize the
adjusting
betrayal was
fine
inevitable.
to the new
But finding
rates.
justice,
The building
even
was
after
still
all these
profitable.
years.
My investment was solid.
Looking back
But this
now, I
wasn't just
realize
about
the
profit
betrayal was
anymore. It was
inevitable.
about balance.
finding justice,
For years, I'd built
even after all
foundations for
these
strangers.
years.
Now I was rebuilding
Looking
one at
back
home,
now, I realize
brick
the
by brick.
betrayal was
The
inevitable.
next morning, Derek
But
left
finding
early,
justice,
claiming
even
he
after
had a
all these
client
years.
shoot. I watched him from the
Looking
porch
back now,
as he
I
got into a
realize the
leased
betrayal
car,
was
one I now
inevitable.
knew he could barely
But finding
afford.
justice,
I sipped
even
my
after all
coffee and
these
smiled.
years.
Let him keep
Looking
posing.
back now,
Let him
I
think
realize
he's
the
in
betrayal was
control.
inevitable.
Because every
But
mirror
finding
he stood in
justice,
front of
even after
was
all
about to
these
show him
years.
what real accountability
Looking
looks
back
like.
now, I realize the
Revenge
betrayal
wasn't
was
loud
inevitable.
anymore.
But finding
It was
justice,
domestic,
even after all
quiet,
these years.
served fresh at breakfast.
Looking
The
back
house
now,
had
I
rules,
realize the
always
betrayal was
did.
inevitable.
You cook what you
But
eat,
finding
you
justice,
clean what you
even
use,
after all
and you
these
speak
years.
with respect. It
Looking
wasn't a
back
hotel,
now, I
it was a
realize the
home.
betrayal
I
was
reminded
inevitable.
them both on their
But finding
first
justice,
full morning back.
even after all
Derek
these years.
smiled that salesman smile
Looking
of
back
his.
now, I
Of
realize
course,
the
Mr.
betrayal
Hart.
was inevitable.
Totally appreciate
But
your
finding
hospitality.
justice, even
We'll be
after
out of
all
your
these
hair in
years.
no time. Good, I
Looking
said,
back
sipping
now,
my
I
coffee.
realize the betrayal
Make sure
was
it's your own
inevitable.
hair next time.
But
My
finding
clippers
justice,
aren't communal.
even after all
He
these
didn't
years.
laugh. Over the next few weeks,
Looking
I
back
watched the
now,
little
I
frictions
realized the
grow like
betrayal was
cracks in
inevitable.
drywall.
But finding
Elena tried to
justice,
help around
even
the
after
house,
all these
cooking dinner,
years.
folding laundry,
Looking
watering the
back now, I
garden.
realized the
Derek, on the
betrayal
other
was
hand,
inevitable.
spent his
But
mornings
finding
in front of the
justice,
mirror,
even after all
rehearsing
these
motivational quotes for his online
Looking back
sessions.
now, I
He'd
realized
film
the
in my
betrayal
living
was
room,
inevitable.
moving my furniture
But
for better
finding
lighting,
justice,
then
even after
forget to
all
put
these
it back.
years.
I didn't say much.
Looking
I
back
just started
now, I
charging
realize the
studio
betrayal
use
was inevitable.
in the form of house
But
chores,
finding justice,
trash duty,
even
lawn
after all
trimming,
these
and
years,
weekend grocery runs. I
looking
called it
back
rent
now,
in
I
kind.
realize the betrayal
Elena
was inevitable.
understood.
But
Derek
finding
didn't.
justice,
One
even
night I
after all
invited
these
a few
years,
old friends from my construction
looking back
days for
now,
dinner.
I realized
Rough
the
hands,
betrayal
quiet
was
men,
inevitable.
the kind
But
who say
finding
little but
justice,
mean every
even after
word.
all these
Derek
years,
came down in a fitted blazer
looking back
and
now, I
introduced
realized
himself
the
like a
betrayal was
politician.
inevitable.
I'm Derek
finding
Cole,
justice,
he said proudly.
even after all these
Entrepreneur,
years.
fitness coach,
Looking back now,
lifestyle
I realized
consultant.
the betrayal
One of
was
my
inevitable.
buddies, Hank, nodded
But
and
finding
said,
justice,
"You lift anything
even
heavier
after
than
all
that
these
fork,
years.
son?" The room went silent.
Looking back now,
Derek
I
laughed
realized the
nervously and
betrayal was
excused
inevitable.
himself to take a business
finding
call.
justice,
That was lesson
even after
one.
all these
Real
years.
work doesn't need an audience.
Looking back now, I
Later,
realized the
I saw
betrayal
him
was
trying to
inevitable.
pitch online
But
coaching
finding justice,
to one of my friend's
even after all
wives,
these years.
telling her he could transform
Looking back
her
now,
brand.
I realized the
I cut that
betrayal
off
was
quick.
inevitable.
Derek,
But
I said,
finding justice,
around here we
even
don't
after
sell
all
what we
these
can't
years.
deliver. He didn't get it
Looking
then,
back now,
but I
I
knew he
realized the
would
betrayal
soon.
was inevitable.
As weeks passed,
But
I
finding
noticed their
justice,
online
even
presence
after all
changing.
these years.
The smiles looked strained, captions
back
turned
now, I
defensive.
realized the
Real
betrayal was
love is
inevitable.
tested.
But finding
Haters don't get
justice,
happy couples.
even after all these
Followers
years.
started dropping. A brand
Looking back
sponsor
now, I
pulled out,
realized the betrayal
citing
was
reputation
inevitable.
concerns.
But finding justice,
At dinner one night,
even
Elena
after all
looked
these
worn out.
years.
"Dad, everything's
Looking
falling
back
apart.
now, I realized
Derek's
the
losing
betrayal was
clients and we
inevitable.
can't pay his credit
But finding
cards."
justice,
I nodded
even
slowly.
after all these
That's what
years.
happens when you chase image instead of
Looking
income.
back now, I
Derek
realized
muttered
the
something
betrayal
under
was
his breath,
inevitable.
something
But
about
finding
boomer
justice,
jealousy.
even after all these years.
I pretended not to hear it.
Looking back now,
Because
I
every
realized the
story
betrayal
needs
was
the
inevitable.
villain to believe he's
But
winning
finding justice,
right before the
even
fall.
after all
I
these
stood up,
years.
cleared my plate and said,
Looking back
"Tomorrow
now, I
night,
realized
we'll
the
have
betrayal
guests
was
again.
inevitable.
Investors
But
this time,
finding justice,
you might want to
even
sit
after all
in.
these
It'll be
years.
educational." He didn't
Looking
realize
back
it yet,
now,
but
I
the next
realized the
dinner
betrayal
wouldn't be
was
about
inevitable.
food.
But
It'd be
finding
about
justice,
exposure
even after
and
all
how
these
quickly
years.
fake muscles collapse under real
Looking
pressure.
back now,
That
I
investor
realized the
dinner
betrayal
was
was
when the
inevitable.
walls finally
But
began to
finding
talk.
justice,
I'd
even
invited a
after
few
all
folks
these
from my
years.
network, contractors,
Looking back
a
now,
property
I realized
broker,
the
one
betrayal was
accountant,
inevitable.
and a
But
pastor's
finding
wife
justice,
who ran the
even
church
after all these
outreach
years.
committee. The kind of people who know
Looking back
everyone
now, I
and
realized
forget
the betrayal
nothing.
was
I set the
inevitable.
table myself.
finding justice,
Slow roast
even
beef,
after all these
cornbread,
years.
collards, and a bottle of wine older
Looking
than
back
Derek's
now, I
career.
realized the betrayal was
Elena
inevitable.
looked anxious.
But finding
Derek
justice,
looked confident.
even after
Too
all these
confident.
years.
He saw an audience.
Looking
The
back
moment
now,
everyone
I
sat
realized
down,
the
he
betrayal
switched
was
on his
inevitable.
charm.
But
"I'm
finding
actually in
justice,
talks with a couple of
even after
investors
all these
myself,"
years.
he said, flashing that
Looking back
Instagram
now,
grin.
I realized the
Expanding
betrayal was
cold fit
inevitable.
into brand
But finding
partnerships,
justice,
retreats,
even after
influencer
all these
crossovers.
years.
Big potential.
Looking
The
back
accountant,
now,
a
I
quiet man
realized the
named
betrayal
Terry,
was
nodded
inevitable.
politely.
But
"You must
finding
have a
justice,
solid business
even
credit
after all
score then,"
these years.
Derek blinked. "Oh,
Looking
yeah,
back now,
definitely,"
I realized
Terry
the
smiled.
betrayal was
"I can
inevitable.
check right now if you
But
like."
finding justice,
"Always good to
even
exchange
after all
contacts."
these
The air
years.
tightened. Derek laughed
Looking back
nervously.
now, I
"Not
realized the
necessary,
betrayal was
man.
inevitable.
It's more of a
But finding
personal brand
justice,
thing,
even
less
after all
paperwork,
these
more
years.
momentum." Hank chuckled
Looking
from the
back
other end
now,
of the
I
table.
realized the betrayal was
"Momentum
inevitable.
doesn't pay rent,
But
son."
finding justice,
Even Eleanor
even
gave a
after all
faint,
these
helpless
years.
smile. That night, after
Looking
the
back
guests
now, I
left,
realized
she
the
sat
betrayal was
quietly at the
inevitable.
kitchen counter.
But finding justice,
"Dad, they knew,
even
didn't
after
they?"
all these years.
"They knew enough," I said. "In this
Looking
town,
back now,
reputation
I
is your
realized the
credit."
betrayal
And
was
Derek
inevitable.
just bounced his.
But finding
The fallout
justice,
began
even
fast.
after all
The
these
church
years.
committee withdrew their collaboration
Looking back
invite.
now, I realized the
Apparently,
betrayal
Derek
was
had pitched a wellness
But finding
fundraiser
justice,
where most of the
even
ticket
after
money
all
would have
these
gone to
years.
his brand exposure.
Looking back now,
The
I
story
realized the
spread
betrayal
like
was
wet
inevitable.
paint.
But
His
finding
sponsors started
justice,
ghosting
even
him
after
one by
all these
one.
years.
He tried to pivot. "Maybe
Looking
I'll
back
start
now,
a
I
podcast."
realized the
People
betrayal
love
was
raw
inevitable.
honesty. I raised
But
an
finding
eyebrow.
justice,
"Try raw
even after
receipts
all these
first."
years.
For a brief moment, I saw his
Looking
mask
back
crack.
now, I
He
realized
wasn't
the
angry,
betrayal
he
was
was
inevitable.
scared. But
But
fear
finding
can't grow
justice,
roots in a
even
man
after
who
all
only
these
knows
years.
shortcuts. The next morning,
Looking
he
back
left
now,
early,
I realized
claiming
the
to
betrayal
meet
was
potential
inevitable.
backers.
But finding
That evening,
justice,
I found
even
an
after all
envelope on
these
the kitchen
years.
table addressed to Elena.
Looking back
Inside,
now, I realized
an
the
unpaid
betrayal
credit
was
card
inevitable.
bill and a
But
note that
finding
read,
justice,
"Can you
even
talk
after
to your
all
dad
these
about
years.
this? Temporary loan."
Looking back
Elena
now,
was
I
crying when
realized
I
the
walked
betrayal
in.
was inevitable.
"He's not who I thought he
But
was."
finding justice,
"No," I said
even
gently,
after all
"but
these
now you're
years.
seeing who you are. You're
Looking back
stronger than
now,
you
I
think."
realized the betrayal was inevitable.
Later that
But
night, I
finding
sat at my
justice,
desk,
even after all
opened my
these
file
years.
labeled Oak and Brick
Looking back
Holdings,
now, I
and added
realized
one
the
more
betrayal was
document,
inevitable.
a letter of
But finding
non-renewal for
justice,
Derek's
even
studio
after all
lease.
these
The
years.
same building he used for his
Looking
fitness
back now,
content.
I
I
realized the
sealed it in
betrayal
an
was
envelope,
inevitable.
stamped
But
it and
finding
whispered,
justice,
Lesson
even after
3,
all these years,
Derek, never disrespect a man
looking
who
back
owns
now,
your
I
backdrop.
realized the
Because
betrayal
by
was
the end of
inevitable.
the week,
But
those
finding
ring lights of
justice,
his
even
would be
after all these
shining on an
years,
empty room. The envelope
looking
was
back
delivered
now,
on
I
a Monday
realized the
morning.
betrayal was
A thick,
inevitable.
beige
finding
packet,
justice, even
stamped
after all
with the
these
Oaken Brick
years.
Holdings logo. The company
Looking back
name
now,
Derek
I
had
realize
mocked
the
weeks
betrayal
earlier
was inevitable.
when he found my
But
architectural
finding
blueprints
justice,
on the dining
even after
table
all these
and called
years.
them Boomer Hobbies.
Looking back now, I
Now,
realize
that
the
same
betrayal
logo
was
carried his
inevitable.
eviction
But
notice.
finding
Elena
justice,
came running into my
even after
office,
all
eyes
these
wide
years.
and hands shaking.
Looking
Dad, this
back now,
this
I
says
realize
Oaken
the
Brick owns
betrayal was
Derek's
inevitable.
studio.
But
That can't be
finding
right.
justice,
I
even
set down
after
my
all
coffee
these
mug and
years.
turned my laptop toward her.
Looking back
It's right.
now, I
On the
realize
screen were the
betrayal was
county deed
inevitable.
records
But
highlighted in
finding
yellow.
justice,
Assignment
even
of
after all
rents
these
and lease
years.
agreements, transfer of note,
Looking back
and
now, I
LLC
realize the
articles of
betrayal was
incorporation.
inevitable. But
Every
finding
page
justice,
dated,
even after
notarized,
all
and
these
filed
years.
months before they ever moved in.
Looking back now, I
Wait,
realize the
she
betrayal was
whispered.
inevitable.
You bought the
But
building.
finding justice,
I didn't buy it,
even
I
after
said.
all these
I
years.
rescued it. You were about to sign
Looking
a
back
5-year
now, I
lease with a
realize the betrayal
landlord
was inevitable.
about to go
But
bankrupt.
finding justice,
You'd have been
even
homeless
after
in
all
6
these
months
years.
anyway. She sank into the
Looking
chair,
back now, I
staring at
realize
the
the betrayal
documents.
was inevitable.
Why didn't you tell me?
But finding justice,
Because
even
sometimes,
after all
Elena,
these years.
the only way to teach an adult
Looking
child
back now,
is to
I
let them
realize
walk
the
into the
betrayal was
storm with an
inevitable.
umbrella they
But finding
ignored.
justice,
Then
even
Derek
after
walked
all
in,
these
face
years.
pale, voice brittle. You
Looking
did
back
this,
now,
he
I
hissed.
realize the
You
betrayal
set us
was
up.
inevitable.
I leaned
But
back.
finding justice,
No, Derek, I
even
set up
after
a
all
safety
these
net.
years.
You just mistook it for a
Looking
spotlight.
back
He
now, I
slammed the
realize
papers on my
betrayal was
desk.
inevitable.
You think this makes
But
you better
finding
than me?
justice, even
Controlling
after all
everyone
these
like
years.
some puppet master? I met
Looking
his
back
glare.
now, I
No, I
realize
think
the
it makes
betrayal
me
was
prepared.
inevitable.
The
But
world
finding
doesn't hand out
justice,
apologies.
even after all
It hands
these
out
years.
invoices. He looked at
Looking
Elena
back
for
now,
backup,
I
but she
realize
stayed
the betrayal
silent.
was inevitable.
Her eyes had the
But
look of
finding
someone
justice,
finally
even after
seeing
all these
daylight
years.
after years of filtered
Looking
brightness.
back now, I realize
I
the
opened
betrayal
one
was
last
inevitable.
folder.
But
Bank
finding
transfer
justice,
receipts,
even after all
escrow
these
confirmations,
years.
and the LLC's
Looking
tax
back now, I
filings.
realize
I
the
slid them
betrayal
across
was
the desk.
inevitable.
Everything's
But finding
legal,
justice,
every cent
even after all
documented.
these
You
years.
wanted to build a brand? This
Looking
is how
back
men
now, I
build
realize the
legacies.
betrayal
He
was
didn't say
inevitable.
another word.
But finding
Just stood there,
justice,
breathing hard,
even
his
after
jaw
all these
tight.
years.
Then he left. Elena
Looking
sat for a
back
while
now, I
longer,
realize
tears
the
silently
betrayal was
rolling.
inevitable.
Dad,
But
she said
finding
softly, I
justice,
was blind,
even
wasn't
after
I?
all these years.
I nodded. No one learns to see
Looking
with their
back
eyes
now,
closed,
I realize
sweetheart.
the betrayal was
That night,
inevitable.
I locked the
But
files
finding
back into the
justice,
safe.
even after
Justice
all
wasn't
these
loud.
years.
It didn't need applause or
Looking back
vengeance.
now, I
It just
realize
needed
the
proof,
betrayal was
and now
inevitable.
the proof was
But finding
airtight.
justice,
The next
even
morning,
after all
I
these
found
years.
Derek's car gone, and his things
Looking back
neatly
now,
stacked
I
in the foyer.
realize the betrayal was
Tripods,
inevitable.
branded
But
shirts, and a
finding
half-empty
justice,
jar of
even
protein
after all
powder.
these
No
years.
note. Just absence.
Looking back
Elena
now,
sat
I
at the
realize
kitchen
the
table,
betrayal
eyes
was
red
inevitable.
but steady.
But
He
finding
left last
justice,
night, she
even
said
after all
quietly.
these years.
Took the rest of his stuff before
Looking
sunrise.
back now, I
poured
realize
2
the
cups of
betrayal was
coffee
inevitable.
and sat across from
But
her.
finding justice,
Sometimes
even
people
after all
run when
these
they
years.
finally see themselves clearly.
Looking
She
back
nodded,
now, I realize
clutching the
the
mug
betrayal was
like it was the
inevitable.
only
But
warm
finding
thing
justice,
left.
even
I
after
feel
all
stupid,
these
Dad,
years.
embarrassed. Everyone warned me.
Looking back
You
now,
warned
I
me.
realize
I
the
reached
betrayal
across the
was
table,
inevitable.
resting my hand
But
on
finding
hers.
justice,
You're not
even
stupid.
after all these
You're
years.
human. You believed in someone who
Looking back
didn't earn
now,
it.
I realize
But that's
the
how you
betrayal was
learn who
inevitable.
deserves your
But
loyalty.
finding justice,
She looked up,
even
eyes
after all
glistening.
these years.
What happens now? No, I
Looking
said
back
you
now, I
rebuild
realize
on
the
your own
betrayal was
terms.
inevitable.
You'll pay
But
rent here
finding
for a few
justice,
months, nothing
even after all
crazy,
these
but
years.
something real. You'll
Looking
handle your
back now, I
finances,
realize
get your
the
own
betrayal
credit
was
back on
inevitable.
track.
But
No
finding
handouts,
justice,
just structure,
even
she
after all
smiled
these
faintly.
years.
Like Oaken Brick?
Looking
Exactly,
back now,
I
I
said.
realize the
Strong
betrayal was
foundation,
inevitable.
solid beams,
But finding
and no
justice,
influences
even
allowed.
after all
We
these
both
years.
laughed for the first time in weeks.
Looking back now,
Later
I
that day,
realized
I
the
drove to the
betrayal was
studio
inevitable.
one last
But
time.
finding
The locks
justice,
had already been
even after all
changed,
these
the
years.
lights dimmed. I stood there
Looking
for a
back
moment,
now, I
looking
realized
around the
the
empty
betrayal was
space that had
inevitable.
once been
But
filled
finding
with his
justice,
empty words.
even after all these
I wasn't
years.
angry anymore. I
Looking
wasn't
back
even
now,
proud.
I realized
was
the betrayal
done.
was inevitable.
As I walked
But
back to my
finding
truck,
justice,
I thought of
even
my
after all
father's old
these years.
saying, "Revenge isn't
Looking
yelling,
back now,
it's the
I
sound of
realized the
balance
betrayal was
returning."
inevitable.
And
But
as I
finding
turned the
justice,
key in the
even
ignition,
after all
I
these years.
realized balance had finally come
Looking
home.
back now,